President Trump's approval ratings are nothing special. Actually, they're extraordinarily low by historic standards. He's clocking in at 44%, according to the latest NBC News Wall Street Journal poll. His support base is highly polarized, with 85% of Republicans behind him and just 9% of Democrats. If those rates drop steadily for the next 2 years, and given the level of polarization they certainly could, Republicans would be in serious danger of losing the House, since low presidential approval ratings correlate significantly with House elections. Then again, Trump's support base may be stable. Here is why. According to that same poll, approximately 57% of voters say that Trump is doing about as well as they expected. Meanwhile, his approval ratings far outclass those of Congress, which has just a 29% approval rating. That's a nonpartisan statistic. And 31% approve of Democrats in Congress, while 32% approve of Republicans in Congress. The most unpopular figure in American politics? That's still House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi, with 19% of people feeling positively about her in any way, against 44% who feel negatively about her. The Democratic Party's negatives double up the Republican Party's. This relatively positive feeling toward Republicans means 60% of respondents are hopeful and optimistic about the future of the country, only 40% are pessimistic. And that's with a sample that shows just 37% of respondents who voted for Trump himself in the presidential election. None of this says that everybody is comfortable with Trump. 52% say Trump's chaotic style is unique to this administration and suggests real problems, but the American people largely agree with Trump's agenda. 86% say a small group in our nation's capital has reaped the rewards of government while the people have borne the cost. 53% say the news media and other elites are exaggerating the problems with the Trump administration because they're uncomfortable and threatened with the kind of change Trump represents. While 37% of respondents say they want Democrats in Congress setting the agenda, 19% say Republicans in Congress should do so, and 37% say Trump should do so. 57% of Americans say Trump is likely to bring change. 63% of those people say he'll bring the right kind of change. 41% of Americans say the economy will get even better, and 73% of those people attribute that success to Trump. Only 4% of Americans think Obamacare works well the way it is. And here is the best statistic of all for Trump personally. 38% of Americans say they like him personally, regardless of whether they like or dislike his policies. All of this suggests that Americans are giving Trump a chance, and that they're tired of the media failing to do so. They think Trump is going to bring change. They want to allow him freedom to pursue that change. Democrats and members of the media who keep saying Trump can't be trusted with the tiller of government ought to have an easy solution. Give Trump all the leeway he wants, and then watch him pursue policies they think are unpopular. By acting as foils for Trump, the media and the left actually prop him up. They allow him to position them as obstacles to making change. Look, Trump is in control. He's the president. The American people are ready to see him perform. Now it's time for him to step up and create the change he's preached for so long. I'm Ben Shapiro. This is The Ben Shapiro Show. We're going to get to that amazing quasi-State of the Union address in just a second. And it really was. It was the best Trump has ever been. And we're going to go through it. We're going to talk about what it meant in terms of rhetoric, what it meant in terms of policy, why it was such a success, even though he was basically preaching a lot of big government programs, where he was truly successful, and why the Democrats just can't help stepping on their own bleeps. But before we get there, we have to talk about our friends over at Tracker. So, if you are somebody who loses stuff all the time, right, you need to rush out the door, and now you're doing what I always do. You're reaching for your wallet and your keys and your phone, and you realize that you've lost your wallet or your keys or your phone. That's what Tracker is for. When you lose your stuff, it makes you feel like a moron. And when my wife loses her stuff, it certainly makes her feel bad because I make her feel bad because I'm a terrible person. But if you're not a terrible person and you want to help your wife, now I help my wife by getting her Tracker. So we put the Tracker, it's this little coin-sized device. You put it on everything from your phone to your wallet to your keys, and it allows you to immediately find your wallet or your phone or your keys, so you never have to worry about losing them again. You know, we all lose that stuff. So with Tracker, you never have to worry about it. It's a coin-sized device. Just pair it to your smartphone. You attach it to anything, and you find its location with the tap of a button. And by the way, what happens if you lose your phone? Well, you press the button on your Tracker device, right? And even ask your Amazon Alexa, and your phone rings even when it's on silent, so it rings through. So this is a big thing with my wife. She always loses her phone, and then it's on silent. You put the Tracker on the phone, and then when you hit the Tracker device, it makes the phone app ring through, and that way you can always find your phone, too. It's an amazing, amazing device. We have a couple of them in our house. Tracker.com is the place to get it. And right now, if you go to thetracker.com, and enter promo code Ben, you'll get a free Tracker Bravo with any order. So you can have two, basically. So it's thetracker.com, promo code Ben, to try that out. And it has a 30-day money-back guarantee, so if you don't like it, you can always send it back. Thetracker.com, promo code Ben, and it's spelled TRACKR.com. thetracker.com, promo code Ben, spelled just like you see here on the screen, track no E, tracker.com. And use that promo code Ben so they know that we sent you. Okay, so Donald Trump gave the speech of his life last night. It was the best speech he's ever given by far. I'm not sure who wrote it, but it was really well written. It was really good. When I first saw the excerpts, I thought that it was horribly written because it had things about shouting your dreams and all this kind of nonsense that sounds like it's from a Joan Baez song, but that's not what the speech actually was. The speech had one moment in particular that everybody is talking about this morning, and they ought to be talking about it for two reasons. One, there was a feeling during the entirety of the Obama administration that the Obama administration really didn't like the military very much, that they thought that the military were basically a bunch of grunts and rubes and that they were to be scorned as opposed to they were people to be honored. And Donald Trump didn't do that last night. Not only didn't he do that, he did what I thought was, it was the best moment I've seen in any State of the Union address ever, actually. And that was when he decided to pay tribute to the wife of the person who had lost her husband in Yemen, the Navy SEAL, right? So this Navy SEAL, Ryan Owens, he's killed in this mission in Yemen authorized by Trump, and he brings her wife to the State of the Union address, and here's what it looked like, and you'll see why it's such a stunning moment.
Ryan was a part of a highly successful raid that generated large amounts of vital intelligence that will lead to many more victories in the future against our enemy. Ryan's legacy is etched into eternity. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so pause it there for 1 second. So at the beginning, you can see all the Democrats are standing right there at the beginning, okay? Now let it go. Right, the Democrats sit down. You can see Kamala Harris sitting down, the senator from California. Keep going, keeps going, the applause. Now watch what the Democrats are doing, because that's the key to this clip. That's it? Okay, so as this clip continued, the Democrats continued to sit. Here are some screenshots of what it looked like as this 2-minute ovation continued. Now, some Democrats were saying, well, you know, we just sat down because the ovation was... No, it wasn't, right? Look at that stark partisan divide. That row down the center right there, that separates the Republicans from the Democrats. Even the Supreme Court justices are standing and clapping at this point. And you can see in the far right of your screen, there's Nancy Pelosi next to Bernie Sanders. Neither of them is standing, and neither of them is clapping for this woman. And that's not the only screen cap like that. Here's another screen cap from the reverse angle. You can see Al Franken here is standing and clapping. You can also see, again, there's Bernie Sanders in the far left of your screen and Nancy Pelosi. Apparently, Keith Ellison and Debbie Wasserman Schultz were also sitting for this part. So, look, they're not stupid enough to sit down at the very beginning when you're honoring the wife of a fallen Navy SEAL. But immediately, as soon as they can, they sit down. And once they're seated, and they don't get up again. And it just demonstrates. So why? Why were they so eager to sit down? I mean, this is a real question. You know, people are treating this as like this is a silly question. Why were they so eager to sit down? And the answer is they didn't want the optic of the entire chamber applauding for a long period of time with Trump as president. So in other words, they dislike Trump more than they like the military. They dislike Trump more than they like the wife of this Navy SEAL. And that's what was going on there. You know, I got a call this morning from Debbie Wasserman Schultz's office. They're very embarrassed about all of this, and they wanted to clarify that she was sitting and clapping, and I said, okay, well, Benny Johnson over at Independent Journal Review, he reported that she wasn't clapping. In any case, what would be so bad about standing? What would be so bad about standing? In fact, George W. Bush at one point, Barack Obama, rather, brought a wounded warrior to, I think it's to the 2014 State of the Union address. Full standing ovation from both sides of the aisle. But when it's Donald Trump bringing somebody to the State of the Union address, and it was really moving. I mean, you can see she's weeping for her husband, and she's signaling to heaven, "I love you, baby," as she's looking up to heaven. I mean, amazing moment for Trump. And the Democrats make it more amazing because the Democrats don't know what the hell they're doing. I mean, the Democrats are so hell bent on trying to make Trump look bad that they forget that they look bad. And that was sort of the running theme of this speech. There were a bunch of themes that Trump hit during this speech that were, I thought, very powerful and very useful. And what was just as amazing is watching the reaction of the Democrats to all of it. So we're going to go through it right now. So Trump opens by doing something smart. He opens with, there's been a lot of criticism that he hasn't paid enough attention to black Americans. There was a lot of criticism recently that he hadn't paid enough attention to a spate of attacks on Jewish cemeteries. Mike Pence tried to take the kind of sizzle out of that by going to a Jewish cemetery in Missouri and doing some work there. But Trump opens the speech with that, which is smart. Just get it off the way, get it off the table, and then he went into his stock speech.
Tonight, as we mark the conclusion of our celebration of Black History Month, we are reminded of our nation's path toward civil rights and the work that still remains to be done. Recent threats targeting Jewish community centers and vandalism of Jewish cemeteries, as well as last week's shooting in Kansas City, remind us that while we may be a nation divided on policies, we are a country that stands united in condemning hate and evil in all of its very ugly forms. Each American generation passes the torch of truth, liberty, and justice in an unbroken chain all the way down to the present. That torch is now in our hands, and we will use it to light up the world.
He continues along these lines, but the fact is that Trump is, a lot of this is stock speech, but it works because, as you'll see, the Democrats don't agree with the stock speech. So the art of politics, the real art of politics is, it's like sumo wrestling. Basically, what you want to do is you want to bring the audience into the circle with you and then throw your opponent out. You want to bring the audience in, you want to say, I agree with you, you agree with me. You know who doesn't agree with us? That guy, right? And Democrats made it real easy last night because every time Trump said something that was eminently true, the Democrats would sit on their hands, or they would fuss, or they would moan. And that continued all night long. So Donald Trump, continues along these lines.
I am here tonight to deliver a message of unity and strength. And it is a message deeply delivered from my heart. A new chapter of American greatness is now beginning. A new national pride is sweeping across our nation, and a new surge of optimism is placing impossible dreams firmly within our grasp. What we are witnessing today is the renewal of the American spirit. Our allies will find that America is once again ready to lead. All the nations of the world, friend or foe, will find that America is strong, America is proud, and America is free.
Okay, so he does that, and then the next thing he does is he begins describing some of the problems that we're facing and what he is here to fix. And some of this is true and some of it isn't, but it's again, smart speech writing because he's creating this contrast. He's saying, here's what it was and here's what I'm going to fix. So here he describes sort of where we were, and then he moves to, here's the big movement that's built up around me. Again, all this is very smart.
I will not allow the mistakes of recent decades past to define the course of our future. For too long, we've watched our middle class shrink as we've exported our jobs and wealth to foreign countries. We've financed and built one global project after another, but ignored the fates of our children in the inner cities of Chicago, Baltimore, Detroit, and so many other places throughout our land. We've defended the borders of other nations while leaving our own borders wide open for anyone to cross and for drugs to pour in at a now unprecedented rate.
Smart of him to do all of this. This is him just describing all of the problems. Then he talks about the earth shifting beneath our feet and the rebellion starting as a quiet protest. All of this is smart. It's when he gets to the stuff where he talks about drug dealers and criminals that it's clear that Democrats are not on the same wavelength. And Trump is very good at drawing the contrast between himself and the so-called enemy. And in this case, the enemy is not just the people on the left. The enemy is the drug dealers and the illegal immigrants. Before we go any further, I do have to say thank you to our advertisers over at Delta Defense. So this is a new advertiser, and you guys are definitely going to want to hear about them. As you know, I'm a strong advocate of the Second Amendment, a very strong advocate of the Second Amendment. In fact, I made my bones, in the last 5 years on taking Piers Morgan off the air, basically, defending the Second Amendment on CNN. And that's why I've teamed up with the United States Concealed Carry Association to do something really cool and really important. The USCCA provides industry-leading firearms education, training, and self-defense insurance. They make sure also, by the way, that if you are in a shooting scenario, they'll provide you defense. If somebody breaks into your house, you have to shoot them. you still may get prosecuted, and they help you out with that. They are also dedicated to getting more guns into the hands of more law-abiding people, responsible, freedom-loving Americans who would do anything to protect the people that they love. So here comes a pretty cool announcement. The USCCA, United States Concealed Carry Association, they're going to buy 10 of my listeners the gun of their dreams, which is pretty awesome. You're about to get 10 chances to win $1,500 for any gun you can possibly choose, any gun you could possibly want. You can pick any gun, any brand, any caliber. $1,500 goes toward it. Go to defendmyfamilynow.com to enter. Defendmyfamilynow.com to enter. Doesn't cost you anything to enter. So you get that entry for a $1,500 gun, basically. Defendmyfamilynow.com right now to enter. They are changing the game for responsible gun owners. As you know, I'm a big advocate of responsible gun ownership and responsible gun use. Go over and check it out right now. Defendmyfamilynow.com to enter. Okay, so back to Donald Trump. So Donald Trump continues along these lines. And there's one point here where he says that he says something really smart. There are a bunch of phrases that he uses that are really, really smart. One of the phrases that he uses that's really smart is he says, what would you say to the American family that loses their jobs, their income, or a loved one because America refused to uphold its laws and defend its borders? That's the sort of smart phraseology that you need from Donald Trump. You need him to pose his policies in opposition to Democrats who don't pay attention to those policies. It's smart. And the Democrats react by sitting on their hands because, of course, they don't want people vetted coming into the country. And Trump does. Again, very smart. And you can see, I mean, we'll go to the parts of the speech where you can see the Democrats are just sitting there on their hands doing nothing. It's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing. There's one point, I don't know if we can find it because the clips are kind of cut together. Now, there's one point where it says, where he starts talking about police and sheriffs. And he says police and sheriffs are members of our community. And it's pretty amazing to watch the Democrats sit on their hands as he talks about how wonderful the police and the sheriffs are.
Police and sheriffs are members of our community. They're friends and neighbors. They're mothers and fathers, sons and daughters. And they leave behind loved ones every day who worry about whether or not they'll come home safe and sound. We must support the incredible men and women of law enforcement. And we must support the victims of crime. I have ordered the Department of Homeland Security to create an office to serve American victims. The office is called VOICE, Victims of Immigration Crime Engagement. We are providing a voice to those who have been ignored by our media and silenced by special interests.
Okay, what's funny is when he says that final line, and the police line they sat on their hands too, but this is the biggest one. He says, free nations are the best vehicle for expressing the will of the people, and America respects the right of all nations to chart their own path. My job is not to represent the world. My job is to represent the United States of America. When he says that, the obvious answer is, that's true. Right? The Constitution of the United States makes you president of the United States. It doesn't make you president of Sudan or president of Somalia or president of France. It makes you president of the United States. And amazingly enough, I mean, truly amazing, the Democrats sit on their hands for this. The applause is muted. They have nothing to say because they don't think of themselves that way. And it exposes, again, the vast difference between kind of right-wing policy and left-wing policy and right-wing philosophy and left-wing philosophy. And this is not a conservative-liberal divide as much as it really is a right-wing, left-wing divide because there is a difference. The right-wing, left-wing divide is that right-wingers actually believe in nationalism. They believe in America. Now, what we think about America, they're splits. But we believe in America and we believe the president ought to be upholding the interests of the people of America. The left wing doesn't believe that. A lot of people on the left, progressives, they believe that they are world citizens. That they're not citizens of the United States. They are citizens of the world. I believe I'm a citizen of the United States, a country with a creed. People on the left believe that they are citizens of the world because the entire world should be united by an internationalist creed that may or may not jibe with what America wants. That's a huge problem. And it's the reason why Donald Trump has really seen this upsurge, because there still is such a thing as nationalism. And, you know, I've ripped on the idea of blood and soil nationalism, but I've never said that nationalism itself as a feeling is the thing that's wrong with the world. In fact, what I've said is that nationalism is necessary but not sufficient. If you're a good American, you must be nationalistic, but that's not enough. You also have to be philosophically American. So you can say, America's a great country, I want to stand with the flag, but you have to know what the flag stands for. There are two parts to this, right? Nationalism, and then beyond that, there's patriotism, and you need both. You need both, right? You can't have one without the other, or it doesn't work. If you're patriotic for ideals without being patriotic for the nation, you don't understand what America is all about. If you're patriotic for the nation without being patriotic for the ideals, you also don't understand what America is all about. But at least Trump is providing this nationalistic perspective, and people on the left are rejecting it wholesale. They won't cheer for this because they think that they're global citizens, they're world citizens. And so, you end up with this bizarre situation where he's saying he's president of the United States, not of the world. And the left is basically confused by this because they think the president of the United States ought to be the head of the UN. Now, we'll continue by talking about the downside to Trump's speech, and that was the actual policy discussion. We'll get to that in just a second, but to see that, you have to go over to dailywire.com. You can check it out there, dailywire.com. And that is $8 a month. If you want an annual subscription, then you can get that at dailywire.com as well. Right now, you get a free copy of the Arroyo DVD, which is a terrific fictional film set on the southern border about one rancher trying to take on the system that is allowing his land to be used as a thoroughfare for drug cartels and illegal immigration. It's dailywire.com. Check it out over there, or go to iTunes or SoundCloud later to download the rest of the show. You can leave your reviews at iTunes and join us. We are the largest conservative podcast in the nation. Okay, so President Trump, the upside is all the rhetoric. He makes a lot of good points here. One of the points that he makes that's great is he talks about government-approved health insurance. His health insurance plan is actually not that great, and we'll talk about it in a second. But what he says here, that mandating every American to buy government-approved health insurance was never the right solution for America. Great language. Again, when Trump says for America, he is again appealing to the parochial interests of Americans, which is something I think a lot of Americans have felt rejected about for years. I wrote a piece for the Jewish Journal in the middle of the last election cycle. And in that piece, I specifically talked about the forces driving Trumpism. And one of those was what I called anti-Americanism. The feeling from the left that they were anti-American was driving this anti-Americanism. And Trump was the guy who was most loudly expressing that by saying the word America loudly and proudly and openly. And saying America was not a place filled with racist, bigot, homophobes. America was a place filled with good people. And Trump continues to do that, again, very smart. Okay, now when it comes to policy, part of the weirdness of the speech was that some of the policy is really, it has nothing to do with conservatism, and watching Paul Ryan nod through it was really weird, because Paul Ryan is much more conservative than President Trump, particularly on fiscal matters. Here's Trump describing some of his policy preferences. Trump goes off on tariffs in the middle of the speech.
Currently, when we ship products out of America, many other countries make us pay very high tariffs and taxes. But when foreign companies ship their products into America, we charge them nothing or almost nothing. I just met with officials and workers from a great American company, Harley-Davidson. In fact, they proudly displayed 5 of their magnificent motorcycles made in the USA on the front lawn of the White House. And they wanted me to ride one, and I said, no, thank you. At our meeting, I asked them, how are you doing? How is business? They said that it's good. I asked them further, how are you doing with other countries, mainly international sales? They told me without even complaining, because they have been so mistreated for so long that they've become used to it, that it's very hard to do business with other countries because they tax our goods at such a high rate. They said that in the case of another country, they tax their motorcycles at 100%. They weren't even asking for a change, but I am. I believe strongly in free trade, but it also has to be fair trade. It's been a long time since we had fair trade. The first Republican president, Abraham Lincoln, warned that the abandonment of the protective policy by the American government will produce want and ruin among our people. Lincoln was right, and it's time we heeded his advice and his words. I am not going to let America and its great companies.
You know, he says that this is his anti-free trade shtick. When he quotes Lincoln about tariffs, okay, let's face a couple of things. One, Lincoln was not an economic genius. He was a political genius. He wasn't an economic genius. And when it comes to tariffs, tariffs weren't good policy in the 1850s, and they're not good policy now. In fact, the Tariff of Abominations, which was passed in 1832, that was one of the things that led to the split between the South and the North, because the South felt rightly that they were being destroyed by the tariff that the North had imposed on them. Eventually, it was let go, but tariffs are a bad idea. The economy is also a lot more tied together than it was in 1864. But Trump's take on trade is really not a great one. It doesn't matter. Paul Ryan is sitting behind him cheering. And then he talks about low-skilled immigration. And he made overtures toward the Democrats about comprehensive immigration reform. He did it in a real soft way. People sort of missed this. But it was really funny. Yesterday, Trump floated a trial balloon about how he wanted comprehensive immigration reform, in which he would include, presumably, legalization for illegal immigrants. In fact, he openly said he would consider it, and even said to his people, according to the New York Times, that maybe they'd add it into the speech. And so he makes this reference to immigration.
Switching away from this current system of lower-skilled immigration and instead adopting a merit-based system, we will have so many more benefits. It will save countless dollars, raise workers' wages, and help struggling families, including immigrant families, enter the middle class. And they will do it quickly, and they will be very, very happy indeed. I believe that real and positive immigration reform is possible as long as we focus on the following goals: to improve jobs and wages for Americans, to strengthen our nation's security, and to restore respect for our laws. If we are guided by the well-being of American citizens, then I believe Republicans and Democrats can work together to achieve an outcome that has eluded our country for decades.
Okay, that's incredibly vague language, and it does open the door to a sort of comprehensive immigration reform approach. Again, would it be shocking if Trump abandoned his sort of I'm going to deport everybody perspective? No, it wouldn't, because Trump was for illegal immigration before he was against illegal immigration. In 2012, he actually said that Mitt Romney was too harsh on illegal immigration. So it's kind of shocking, but really not. But again, on policy, the speech wasn't any great shakes. It was the rhetoric and the fact that the Democrats were sitting on their hands for the most important aspects of this that was really telling. He went on and on about infrastructure, too. He talked about how he wanted to spend $1 trillion on infrastructure. He said he wanted to get private companies to participate. But again, all that is really just subsidies and boondoggles. Here he talks about spending $1 trillion on infrastructure.
Another Republican president, Dwight D. Eisenhower, initiated the last truly great national infrastructure program, the building of the interstate highway system. The time has come for a new program of national rebuilding. America has spent approximately $6 trillion in the Middle East. All the while, our infrastructure at home is crumbling. With the $6 trillion, we could have rebuilt our country twice, and maybe even 3 times if we had people who had the ability to negotiate. To launch our national rebuilding, I will be asking Congress to approve legislation that produces a $1 trillion investment in infrastructure of the United States, financed through both public and private capital, creating millions of new jobs.
That's a big expenditure, and Paul Ryan actually got up at this point and started clapping. Again, the question is going to be, when all of this is boiled down into policy, and this is always the question with State of the Union addresses, not unique to Trump, when all this gets boiled down into policy, when a lot of the proposals Trump is making are Obama and Bush proposals, when all this gets boiled down into policy, does it actually look like something that's going to happen, or does Congress buck? Because it turns out that it's very easy to utter platitudes about spending tons of money on infrastructure. When somebody actually has to put their name to that vote, it's not quite as easy. It's not quite as easy. And it got worse, I think, for Trump on policy than this. We can skip the part here on pre-existing conditions and access to health care if we can, and go to the part where he talks about child care. That's a little bit further on. He talks about how he wants to work with members to make child care accessible and affordable. So this is where he basically makes the Ivanka Trump case.
My administration wants to work with members of both parties to make child care accessible and affordable, to help ensure new parents that they have paid family leave, to invest in women's health, and to promote clean air and clean water, and to rebuild our military and our infrastructure.
Okay, and everybody cheers and everybody claps. Okay, what exactly does that look like in policy? Nobody knows what the hell that looks like in policy, because this is all Ivanka Trump's policy. And Paul Ryan actually stood up when he said paid family leave. Who's going to pay for that? You? Me? I mean, I'm not going to get paid family leave. My wife's not going to get paid family leave. Presumably, my wife and I are going to pay for other people's paid family leave. Companies will pay for the paid family leave. The question is, again, just because Trump gave a really good speech last night doesn't make a lot of his policies conservative, and this is going to be the divide for Republicans. The truth is that in policy, Donald Trump looks a lot like, in terms of domestic policy, he looks a lot like George W. Bush's compassionate conservatism, just under the rubric of Trumpism. Remember, George W. Bush in his first term campaigned as a compassionate conservatism. He then proceeded to blow out the budget. Blew it out. Long before Obama blew out the budget, Bush blew out the budget. He added something like $6 trillion to our national debt. I don't think there's any question that Trump is looking in the same direction, because he's not going to do anything with entitlements. He said he's not going to do anything with entitlements. He's talking about adding costs with regard to infrastructure plans, and adding costs with regard to tariffs, and adding costs with regard to Obamacare, because even his Obamacare reversal plan is basically Obamacare light, with massive subsidies to individuals in state high-risk pools. He talks about how he wants to pass an education bill that funds school choice for disadvantaged youth. Great idea, but it has nothing to do with the federal government. It should be state governors doing that. I'm old enough to remember when Republicans were saying the Department of Education should be completely destroyed. And now he's basically proposing a new No Child Left Behind Act, except as vouchers. Listen, I'm happy for vouchers. I love vouchers. I'd be glad to get a school voucher for my kids, believe me, because my kids are going to private school, not public school. But all of this does blow out the budget. And I was not aware that the party of fiscal irresponsibility was the Republican Party. That was always the Democratic Party. So does this mean that Paul Ryan is basically going to sign off on all of this because he wants to be politically popular? Does he think, okay, if we get Trump past 2020, then all of a sudden I'll get my entitlement reform? It's going to be interesting to see whether the pedal hits the metal at any point, whether Trump goes up against Ryan at any point, whether there really is any conflict here, or whether it is just going to be whatever Trump wants, Trump gets, until Trump stumbles into a problem. Okay, the reactions to the speech were really interesting, because a lot of the left realized how good the speech was, and it really was. It was the best that Trump has ever been. Again, that one magic moment was the moment. It was the moment. It's really funny. In my novel, I have a situation exactly like this, where a president reaches out to a suffering victim. Trump understands the power of narrative better than a lot of Republican presidents have. The fact is, George W. Bush had guests in the balcony, too, for his speeches. But the guests in the balcony for Bush's speeches were never victims. Right? They're never just people they were people who, like, started a company. Trump trotted out people who, he trotted out, I thought, one of the best portions of his speech. He brought out a girl, I think she's 21 years old, who was a victim of a disease. I think it's called Pompe disease. And her parents basically started a medical firm in order to take care of her. And he says that the FDA should cut its regulations so that we can make sure that she gets the kind of cures she needs. It's great stuff, right? Because she's going to get a standing ovation, so it looks like his agenda gets a standing ovation. He did the same thing with regard to a lot of the victims of illegal immigration. They're going to get standing ovation because they're victims and because we feel bad for them. And so it looks like his agenda gets a standing ovation. Trump understands stagecraft. Jeremy Boring said this morning to me, and I think this is right. This speech was just a masterpiece of stagecraft. Whether you liked the content or not, whether you liked the presentation or not, the speech itself was a masterpiece of stagecraft. And the Democrats helped with the stagecraft by playing the heels. I mean, the Democrats really put on the black hat for this speech. And again, I go back to that picture from that point where we could see, do we have that picture again of the crowd? Again, this is the Democrats playing the heels, right? They're there to play the heroes. They're all wearing white, supposedly in support for the women's suffrage movement. They're playing the heels here. This is the American people and the Republicans and Trump cheering for a Gold Star widow who's crying and pointing up to heaven in some sort of sign to her husband. And look at the Democrats. They're all on their butts because they don't want to give Trump the moment where they're all clapping. They don't want that. They were happy to play the heels, and it was clear that they were more than willing to play the heels, which is kind of amazing. So the reactions to the speech on the left, a lot of people were apoplectic about the speech on the left because it was so successful. Chris Matthews, who understands populism, because he's really a populist, he's sort of a Bernie Sanders lefty populist, not quite as left as Bernie Sanders, but he was always sort of an Ed Schultz guy, a guy who understood democratic populism, appealed to blue-collar folks. Chris Matthews on MSNBC, he says that Trump's program is going to cross the aisle.
I just think I've been nothing more to say than the power of that moment. There she is, a regular woman who's lost her spouse. And I thought the powerful political moment, and I was watching it all, and I watched when the Democrats did get up to, and even Tim Ryan, the VP nominee of the Democratic Party. I think this line of economic nationalism works. I think left, right, and center, I think people have a sense of righteous indignation, right or wrong, that we have been screwed worldwide. We must restart the engine of the American economy, make it easier for companies to do business in the United States and much harder for companies to leave. I thought that was a winner politically. I think that's probably the reason he was elected in Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Ohio. It is his winning ticket, economic nationalism.
Okay, and the problem is that a lot of that program isn't that great, but it is how Trump thinks he is going to win. Chris Wallace, he said that Trump delivered one of the best speeches a president has ever given to Congress.
I think Donald Trump reinvented it again tonight, 36 years later. I thought it was by far the best speech I've ever heard Donald Trump give. It was one of the best speeches in that setting I've ever heard any president give. He certainly kept faith with his base. There were two extraordinary moments. One was when he said, we are going to repeal and replace Obamacare, and you just felt a guttural roar from the Republican side of the aisle. They have been waiting 7 years for a president to say it, and finally tonight, for the first time, a president said that to a session of Congress. On the other hand, he reached out. The other point I was going to make is he also talked about radical Islamic terrorism. I believe that's the first time any president has ever said that from the well of the House. On the other hand, he reached out to Democrats.
That was really good stuff, according to Chris Wallace, and he's, of course, exactly right. Now, the Democrats are faced with a problem, which is, how do you fight this? How do you fight this? And the answer is that they really couldn't. So let's do some stuff I like and some stuff I hate, because how the Democrats responded to this is in the stuff I hate, because they don't understand how to deal with this. The thing that they should do, theoretically, is let Donald Trump basically, hang himself. They should basically let Donald Trump speak, get his plaudits, move on with their lives. Everybody gives a good speech once in a while. This is a really good speech by Donald Trump. It's a good moment for him. Let him have his moment, and then hit him. But the Democrats can't hold their fire. They've never heard the idea of holding their fire because they've never had to hold their fire before. They've always had the media to create these false waves that would swamp the other side. And so they've never had to actually be strategic in their thinking. And so instead of doing things I like and then things I hate, let's do things I hate first. So here's the things I hate. Okay, the Democratic response to this State of the Union address was really quite egregious. Tom Perez, who's the new head of the Democratic National Committee, and Keith Ellison, who's the guy who almost won, they went out there and they were speaking about the speech, and they basically were ripping the speech up and down.
This was Steve Bannon on steroids with a smile. Start out with alternative facts. I inherited a mess from Barack Obama. No, Barack Obama inherited the Great Recession.
Okay, the fact that they have to keep defending Barack Obama, the fact that they have to portray Donald Trump as Steve Bannon's tool and puppet, it's so stupid. It's so stupid. What they really should do is they should say, listen, we didn't agree with everything that President Trump said tonight. We were glad that he came to the center. We're glad that he was parroting some policies that we were the champions of, like paid family leave. Right? We're glad that he seems to be reaching across the aisle on some of this stuff. We'll see how that materializes. If they did that, they'd actually have a better shot of shattering his coalition than if they play the opposition. The thing that's driving Trump into the right-wing coalition is the fact that the left hates him so much. If the left would actually take what they can get from him, it would actually have a better shot of stopping him in some ways, because either he would side with them in order to pass his agenda, which would tick off some of his base, or his own base would rebel against him for actually pursuing left-wing policy. But the Democrats don't know what they're doing. Then, this is amazing, the person they trotted out to actually do the response, because there's always a State of the Union response, the person they trotted out to do the response is a guy named Steve Beshear. Okay, Steve Beshear is the former governor of Kentucky. If the future of your party looks like something straight out of the Crypt Keepers, then I'm going to go with you have no future to your party. And also, there's one black guy in the back, but it's a bunch of white people in the middle of Kentucky at a diner. And it's an old dude at a diner. This is like a nightmare. It's like a living hell that you would walk into. You'd open the door, you die, and then you open the door to hell, and this is what greets you. It's just all of these old people sitting there waiting for you to tell them their life stories, staring at you creepily. So here's former Governor Steve Beshear. Is this the kind of inspiration that Democrats are looking for? Because if so, woo, Trump's going to have an easy race.
I'm a proud Democrat, but first and foremost, I'm a proud Republican.
Wait, what?
And Democrat, and mostly American.
Wait,
and
what?
like many of you, I am worried about the future of this nation. Mr. President, as a candidate, you promised to be a champion for families struggling to make ends meet. And I hope you live up to that promise. But one of your very first executive orders makes it harder for those families to even afford a mortgage.
Okay, so the future of the Democratic Party, we don't have to listen to him, the future of the Democratic Party is a 72-year-old guy named Steve Beshear. And the future of and Nancy Pelosi is the future, and Tom Perez, who I think is 60 years old, is the future, and Bernie Sanders is the future. It's a bunch of people they actually had to physically exhume from the ground in order to bring them out to fight against Donald Trump here. It really is amazing. I will say this. Also, you can see how good Trump looks for his age when you put him next to Steve Beshear, right? Trump's 70. Steve Beshear's 72. Okay, Steve Beshear looks like he's got 10 years on Trump, right? pretty amazing. But in any case, the fact that this is the best that they can do, I do love that part at the very beginning where he says, I'm a Democrat, but first and foremost, I'm a Republican. Say, first and foremost, you're senile, dude. And if this is the best that you can do, again, these are the faces that greet you in hell, before, or at least in purgatory. It's like the waiting room for hell. I won't say it's hell, but it looks like the waiting room for hell, right? It looks like no one really knows where they're going yet. Everybody's slightly confused as to why they're there staring into the camera from behind. Why is there a drink machine behind them, and why am I suddenly hungry for a greasy hamburger? I don't know. But I guess we'll have to ask former Governor Steve Beshear. Goodness gracious. Couldn't they get anybody to give this thing? Like anyone? There wasn't anybody who raised their hand and said, I want to do this? Alrighty, okay, time for a thing that I like. So we were doing Best Picture losers that should have won. So in 1971, the picture that won Best Picture was The French Connection, which is a Gene Hackman film and William Friedkin. I think that it's wildly overrated. I know that John Nolte is a huge fan of that film. I think that it is a very overrated film. It's not particularly exciting. The car chase scene that made such a big hubbub at the time, there's a famous car chase scene where Gene Hackman's in a car and he's chasing the L, basically. He's chasing a train. But it's not, it's literally him just driving through the city. It's got its moments, but it's not a great movie. The best movie of that year is A Clockwork Orange, and it's not close. So A Clockwork Orange, the novel by Anthony Burgess, is a terrific novel. It's a better novel than it is a movie. The movie's pretty good, but the novel is really good. And the book, it's really interesting. The book itself has two endings. It has one for American audiences and it has one for British audiences. In one of the endings, the whole plot of A Clockwork Orange is about a guy who's a career criminal. And the police capture him, and they basically brainwash him not to be a career criminal anymore. And by doing so, they destroy his sex drive, and they destroy his will, and they destroy everything about him to make him into kind of a normal citizen again. And so the question of the book is, did they do the right thing, or did they not do the right thing? Because he's no longer capable of doing anything, basically, but at least he's not a criminal anymore. In the original book, he actually, one of the endings, he ends up maintaining his law-abidingness, and he's just sort of a wimp for the rest of his life. In the other one, he ends up returning to a life of crime, like it doesn't hold. And in the movie, I think they go back to if I recall correctly, I don't give away the ending. It's one of those two endings. In any case, here's the trailer for Clockwork Orange. The real reason it didn't win is because it was rated X as opposed to being rated R, and so that was off-putting to a lot of people.
There was me, that is Alex, and my three droogs, that is Pete, Georgie, and Dim. And we sat in the Korova milk bar trying to make up our razoo docs what to do with the evening. The Korova milk bar sold Milk Plus, which is what we were drinking. This would sharpen you up and make you ready for a bit of the old ultra-violence.
Little droogies. The evening's the great time, isn't it, Alex Boy?
He's enterprising, aggressive, young, bold, vicious. He'll do.
Who on earth could that be?
Now it was lovely music that came to my aid, a bit of the old Ludwig van.
So part of the principle of the film and of the book is that he loves Beethoven's music, and then they use Beethoven's music in order to deprogram him basically from violence. It's a really, really good film. Stanley Kubrick, this is one of Kubrick's best films. Kubrick is a really up and down director, sometimes in the space of one movie. Full Metal Jacket is half fantastic and half what? But the fact is that it's actually two good movies, but they're separate movies. This film is really first rate. Again, A Clockwork Orange, not for immature audiences for sure. Okay, time for a little bit of Bible talk. So every Wednesday here on the Ben Shapiro Show, we talk a little bit about the Bible portion of the week. This week's Bible portion is from a Bible portion called Truma. It's in the book of Exodus. And so this is from Exodus 25, 1-2. It says, "The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, have them take for me an offering. From every person whose heart inspires him to generosity, you shall take my offering." This is about the building of the tabernacle. And the entire Torah portion is dedicated to all the details surrounding the building of the tabernacle and the measurements and what it looked like and what it was like. And what's amazing about this is that God says to Moses, not, you are going to forcibly tax everybody. Instead, it's, have them take for me an offering, and from every person whose heart inspires him for generosity, you shall take my offering. And people immediately show up. Okay, so what this teaches is, one, the best society is one that is voluntarism-based. The best charity is the charity that is given on the basis of voluntary nature. But second of all, you have to have an informal social structure that makes it beneficial for people to give charity. So both of those things are necessary. Yes, be libertarian when it comes to government policy, but yes, you also have to have a strong social structure that encourages people to do the right thing, to bring offerings from the heart in order to make the society a better place. You can't have one without the other. If you have a libertarian society where you don't have any social structure, pretty quickly nobody gives anything, and all of the sort of communal public goods upon which we rely immediately dissipate. If you have a social structure without a libertarian structure, instead you have sort of a religious theocracy, then you actually end up killing a lot of the social structure, because the government ends up taking the place of the social structure, coercing people into doing the right thing. People don't want to do the right thing at that point when they're being forced to do it. You know, life is about choices, and we ought to be encouraging great choices without removing the power to choose. Okay, so we'll be back here tomorrow, I'm sure, with more Democratic reactions to Donald Trump's terrific State of the Union address. I'm Ben Shapiro. This is The Ben Shapiro Show.